very basic, but at least we have something on screen. And before we discuss the external modules and actually set up a module that nicely watches our code and does the restarts for us, I also want to showcase what we have in the request object. Now, this is going to be a giant object, so I'm not going to cover each and every property. However, I would want to showcase a property that gets us the URL. And what would be the URL? Well, that would be an address. And if you worked with React or DOM, you know that, for example, for the homepage, we used /. And then if the client wants to go to, for example, about page, he or she would enter / and then the about. Now, in our case, notice how we're still serving the same content. So just to give you a quick introduction of the request object, as well as set up a bit more realistic application, we're going to go with the request. Now, again, if you want, you can log it. So we're going to go here with request, and you'll see that it is a giant object. Now, since we made some changes, we do need to stop it, and then we'll go with node app.js. But notice how we're not right away console logging the request object. Why? Well, because server is waiting for those requests. So we need to go back to our browser and then refresh. And then, of course, once we navigate back, like I said, this is going to be a giant object with bunch of useful info. Now, what we're looking for is the URL property, because that URL property is going to tell us, well, what address client is requesting. So what endpoint the client is requesting. And like I said, for the homepage, the common practice is using simple /. So in here, we can set up the if statement where I say if request URL is equal to the homepage, then of course, this is what I would like to send back. And just to speed this up, I can tell you that we can cheat a little bit where we can just place everything in the end. And in my case, I'll just cut out my string. So we have res.end. So now we simply send the text. And now, of course, I also would want to check for the about or contact or whatever. So in here, let's go with if and then request and URL. And if that one is equal to about, then of course I can send different text. And as far as the text, I'm just going to say here is our short history. And then lastly, well, what happens if the user is trying to access a resource that doesn't exist on our server? So we'll have the about page, we'll have the home page. What about if the user is asking for a contact page that we don't have? Well, here we'll simply set up a default response. We'll say res.end, and just to make it interesting, I'll set up the template string, and I'll show you that if we really want to, we can also pass in directly HTML, and I'll say, oops, an exclamation point. I'll close my HTML. Again, please understand, this is just a basic scenario. Of course, that's not how we'll be setting up our APIs or nothing like that. But just to give you a quick intro, we'll do it quick and dirty, where there's going to be a paragraph, and we'll say we can't seem to find the page that you're looking for. Page you are looking for. And at the very end, I would want to set up a link that allows the user to navigate back. So I'll go with href and I'll say /, which just means homepage. And we're going to go back home. Let's close our link. Let's save that one. So at the moment, of course, we have the about. And by the way, almost forgot. Yes, we do need to stop the server. And we need to go with node and then app.js. Refresh one more time. There it is. Notice how we don't have the about. We can't seem to have the page you're looking for. And that is actually a bit interesting because it should be available, right? And of course, the reason is because I messed up on the URL property. My bad. Let me do this one more time. And we'll stop the server here. Again, let's run node app.js. And now we should have, here's our short history. That's our about page. Then we have the home page. And of course, you're already familiar with our error page. So if I'll go with error or any kind of resource that doesn't exist, then of course we'll get the error page. And of course, we can bravely navigate back home and we go back to our homepage. that should do it for the quick intro of base modules. And now, of course, we are ready to move on to our next topic. All right. At this point, we're familiar with two types of modules, our own, as well as the nodes built in ones. But just like in any good infomercial, I'll say, but wait, there's more. We also have access to the world's biggest code store. And before you seriously start questioning my mental state, imagine this scenario. You're building an app. And of course, as any good app, it needs to have a slider, just for funsies. Now, at this point, you generally have two options. Build it from the scratch yourself, or search on Google and copy paste someone else's solution. While I have no issues with either of these options, keep in mind that someone somewhere has struggled with the same issue, the need for the slider. And there's a good chance that that person was kind enough to build it and share the whole project with us. So our only job is to go through the docs and with the help of one command, just add it to our project. We can do that because when we install Node, we automatically also install NPM, or Node Package Manager. And NPM enables us to do three things: reuse our own code in other projects, use code written by other developers, and lastly, share our own solutions with other developers as well. The NPM project is hosted at npmjs.com. Again, the site is npmjs.com. And here you can find everything starting with useful utility functions to full-blown frameworks and libraries. And as an example, if you're familiar with React, you know that React has the Create React app package. And of course, it is hosted on the NPM. A typical Node project will have more than few NPM packages installed as dependencies. And before we install some cool packages, let's talk about naming. NPM calls the reusable code a package. And a package essentially is a folder that contains a JavaScript code. Now, another names you'll hear are modules and dependencies. And to tell you honestly, at this point, all three are used interchangeably when talking about shareable JavaScript code. So don't be surprised if during the course I call them any of these names: package, dependency, or module. At the end of the day, they all mean the same thing. Lastly, let me just mention two things. First, there is no quality control in NPM registry. Anyone can publish anything. So it's up to you to sniff out the empty and useless packages. And yes, there are quite a few of those ones out there as well. A good indication of the security and usefulness of package is the amount of weekly download. If the number is high, meaning if it's popular, it's a good chance that it's a battle tested and ready to go. And that brings me to my second point. Remember the slider example we discussed in the beginning of the video? When it comes to NPM packages, there's a good chance that if there is a bug, someone else has already faced it. And as a result, it's already fixed in the package, or there's a working solution. All right. So that should do it for intro. Let's start using Node Package Manager in our own project. And as a side note, if you want to search for some packages, just visit npmjs.com. And then, for example, if you're looking for the Bootstrap, you'll find the package. And of course, you can click on any of them. This will bring you to the docs, as well as weekly downloads and rest of the stuff. Once we're familiar with Node Package Manager, let's see how we can start using it in our own projects. And the good news is that it's much simpler than you would expect. You see, when we install Node, we also install NPM. And because of that, we have access to NPM global command. And you can check the NPM version by running npm --version in your terminal. Just keep in mind that the version most likely won't be the same as your Node's version, and that is totally okay. So you can either do that in the terminal or, of course, in the integrated terminal, and you can simply type npm and then hyphen hyphen version. I believe you can also check by hyphen hyphen v, and there it is. Of course, now we have the version for our Node package manager. And then we have two flavors. We can install package as a local dependency, and that just means that we'll only use that package in this particular project that we're working on. And the command for that one would be npm install, or I for short, and then whatever is the package name. So whether that is Bootstrap, Lodash, Express, or whatever. Or we can install dependency as a global dependency. And that just means that we can use it in any project. And the command for that one would be, again, npm I or install, whichever method you prefer, and then hyphen g. So this is going to be the flag, and then again the package name. Now, when you install something globally, most likely on a Mac, they will ask you for the sudo. So you'll have to provide the credentials. That's why you'll run sudo npm install and then hyphen g, and again package name. As far as which one you'll use more often, that definitely will be a local dependency flavor. Because even though, yes, you can install packages globally with arrival of npx, there's actually less and less need for setting up something globally. That's why we'll focus on local dependencies first, how to set it up in our project. And then in a few videos, when we talk about npx, I'll cover why there's less need for setting up something globally. Now, there's one more thing that we would need to set up in our project as far as dependencies. So I know you're eager to start installing the packages, but let's just wait a little bit. And in the next video, we'll add that extra thing that we're missing right now. And then we'll be in good shape. And then we'll start installing every package under the sun. Excellent. We now know that we have access to the npm global command. We now know that in order to install the local package, we will need to run npm I and the package name. So what are we missing? Well, we're missing file by the name of package.json. And essentially, you can think of it as a manifest file that stores important information about our project. And there are three ways how you can create package.json. First is the manual approach, where you just create a package.json in the root. And please do that in the root if that's something that eventually you decide doing. And there, of course, you would need to create each property. Or there are two ways how we can automate this. And the first one is running npm init. And in there, they will just step by step ask you the questions. And if you want to skip it, you can just press enter. And the another way, the third way, is running npm init with a Y flag, and then everything is set up as default. So I'm not going to show you the manual approach. It's just too time consuming. And we'll right away go with npm init. First, I'll show you the step-by-step approach. And then, of course, I'll show you how everything is set up by default using the Y flag. So go to your terminal and just type npm init. And there it is. Of course, now they tell you that there's going to be a walkthrough of creating a package.json file. And the first one is the package name. And by default, of course, it is going to use the folder name. Now, keep in mind that if you eventually want to publish this package, then the name has to be unique. So you need to make sure that nowhere in the NPM you can see the package with the same name. And I'm just going to go with tutorial. As far as version, we'll talk about versions shortly. So I'll just skip this one. As far as description, whatever, again, is just the default. Now, as far as the entry point, eventually we'll change it. But for now, it's good enough. We're going to go with one intro.js and then the test command, as well as git repository and keywords and author and license. And we simply say yes, and we are in good shape. So now, of course, we have the package.json file with name, version, description, as well as the main property, and of course, the scripts, author, and the license. Now I'll remove it. I'll say delete, and I'll show you that, of course, you can skip all of those questions by simply typing npm init and y. And as you can guess, yes, of course, you can come here later and then just change these values. That's why it's definitely faster to just type npm init and then the y flag. So why do we need this package JSON? Well, because if I would want to install the package, the local package, now, of course, this package is going to be stored as a dependency. And to show you that, let's just go with npm. And you know what? Let me clear the console first. So we're going to go with npm I, and then we're going to go with the package name Lodash. And if you're not familiar with Lodash, it's just a utility library, and I'm just specifically using for installation purposes. There's no real reason to have Lodash for our own project, but it's just something pretty interesting that I would want to showcase. That's why we're using Lodash. And we run it, and notice how we installed the package, and check it out. Now in the package JSON, we have dependencies property, and it's an object, and inside of that object, we have a package by the name of Lodash. Now, I'll show you in this video, or maybe in the next one, why it's so important to have this package JSON. But another thing that I would want to showcase, once we can see that we have dependencies property, if you go in your Visual Studio Code and if you click on Refresh Explorer, what you'll also notice is this node modules folder. And in that node modules folder, this is where all the dependencies are stored. So if you don't have that folder already, NPM creates it. So in our case, of course, we didn't have any dependencies. So when we install that first dependency, NPM creates that folder, and this is where you'll find the dependencies. Now, notice something interesting where for the Lodash, we only have one folder, right? So we have only one dependency. But when we need to keep in mind that, of course, there's going to be some packages that have other dependencies. And that's why I first installed Lodash, just to showcase that, yes, once you install dependency, of course, it is going to be in the node modules. But if you'll try to install a package that is bigger, that uses other dependencies, you'll notice something pretty cool. Where if I clear my terminal and if I'm going to run npm I and then bootstrap, again, you can use any other package you could want. This is just to showcase how the packages work. We won't use the bootstrap in this project. So once I install and once I refresh, check it out. Not only I have Lodash, not only I have Bootstrap, which I installed, but since Bootstrap is using jQuery as well as the Popper.js, now these are installed as dependencies. And if you take a look at the dependencies property, now of course we have the Bootstrap as well. And again, the whole point of this video is to showcase why we would need package.json. So we need it because we need to provide information about our project. And inside there, a very important property is the dependencies one, because in there, we'll just store the dependencies which our project is using. And then some packages are actually going to use more dependencies and they will be automatically installed as well. In our case, that was Bootstrap. And just to give you a taste of the package, why don't we just navigate to app? And I'm going to do that below the comments. Of course, you probably would need to clean the file. And as a side note, the last module, the HTTP, I saved in a file by the name of 12 HTTP. And back in the app.js, in order to start using the module, in our case, I guess I'm going to go with Lodash. First, I would need to set up the variable. And common convention is calling the variable like so. And we'll set it equal to require. And now, of course, we have access to the Lodash. Now, this is the difference between node packages, like, for example, the HTTP or the file module or whatever, and the ones that you install, the external ones. The external ones, you always have to install first. If you won't install the dependency. Well, Node won't be able to find it. So in our case, we did install the dependency, the Lodash. So now, of course, I can just assign it to the variable. And since Lodash is utility library, why don't we test out one of their methods? And I'm just going to go with items, and I'll create an array of arrays. So items is going to be an array. However, the items are going to be arrays itself. So 2, then 3, and then we're going to go with 4. And Lodash has this method, the flat and deep method, that effectively will just spit this back as a flat array. And the way we set it up, we just go with const, and I'll call this new items. And then since we have access to everything in this variable, now I can simply go with underscore here, dot, and then flat and deep. So flat and deep, and then we'll pass in the items. And now if we console log new items, and if I go to my terminal and just type node app.js, and by the way, I need to save it. So let me go back. I'll say node app.js. And once we run, check it out. In a console, I can see, of course, the 1, 2, 3, 4. So Lodash has the method by the name of flat and deep. We have access to it because we install it as dependency. And now, of course, I can start using it. Now, we're not going to use Bootstrap in this project because that would be too time consuming. Bootstrap was just used so you can see that some dependencies will have more packages. So once we install one dependency, there's actually going to be more dependencies. And hopefully you have a clear understanding of how you would set up package.json, how we would install the package. And next video, I would want to showcase why having package.json is so crucial and so beneficial when we are starting to share our project.